All right. Well, I want to welcome everybody to our and thanks for joining us here. We're back again with our fourth installment of Let's Talk About series, hosted by Capital City Nurses and Dr. Ernest Brown. Couple of quick housekeeping notes. One, as you just heard, we're going to be recording this, and we will make it available on our YouTube channel soon after. So, if you want to send this information out or view it again, you'll be able to do that. Secondly, Dr. Brown's going to talk about this topic, and then what we'll do is there's a chat box where you can put in questions, and this is very interactive. So please, if something comes to mind, put it in there. Our very own Bree, who's moderating this Zoom, will kind of collate all the questions and make sure that if there's the same question has come up a couple of times, she'll make sure that she sort of incorporates that into the question and answer session at the end. So put your questions in the chat box as early and often. Back to my welcome. I want to welcome everybody to this talk. I trust everybody is staying safe and healthy. And the purpose of these seminars that we've put on here over the course of the last 2 years is to get industry leaders to talk about health-related topics. And this is a very important topic, the coronavirus and the Delta variant in particular. I'm probably not alone in my efforts to sort of quiet the noise and get through the misinformation that's out there. It's very hard to get the facts. And we're really blessed to be able to have Dr. Ernest Brown with us here to share this accurate information, which allows us to share with people that we talk to on a daily basis the truth. And so then they can make informed decisions about their own personal choices and things like that. So just a real quick introduction for those of you that don't know, Dr. Ernest Brown, founder of Doctors to You, a concierge physician practice that services DC, Maryland, and Virginia. He's trained in immunology and virology, and he's really been on the front edge of the COVID pandemic really since the beginning. And as I said earlier, we've had him for this will be our fourth session with him, and each time we learn something new, and it's really great. So I know this affects us personally and professionally, and again, put those questions in the chat box as we go. I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Brown, and let's talk about the variant. Welcome.
Thanks everyone for joining in. I certainly look forward to getting some questions. I just want to be able to be here to provide support, just as we have been doing throughout the pandemic. Certainly, even after this, if there are any questions, you can reach out to Bola or the others at Capital City Nurses to get to me. But this is an open forum to be able to talk more about the Delta variant. So more in the news certainly has been coming as we have been through this pandemic. It is about the passage of time. It's the evolution of things. And where are we now versus where were we this time last year? We are soon approaching the winter, and that is a concern because we will have other creatures in the area that includes influenza. So what we know about and what we are learning about COVID-19 still to this day is still going to evolve even from a year from now, 5 years from now. And we may even say 5 years from now, of course, hindsight's 2020. But particularly for this discussion about variants. Variants are the rule of law of nature, if you will. Viruses, this type of virus in particular, don't just sit there and you have to think of it like this, just as evolution has occurred, things over time, the way, you can have generations of bunny rabbits that just spring up every spring year and they get larger and larger colonies. Same things for viruses, they keep propagating. And as they propagate, this type of virus in particular, they mutate, they spread out. It's like genealogy, they're fingers of a tree. And variants are the natural progression to a point that, which is common throughout all of Darwin's experiences, the survival of the fittest. The coronavirus is trying to find its way. Its intention is not necessarily to destroy life, but it is finding its way where it may reach a certain equilibrium in your ecosystem. But for where it is right now, some of these variants will be concerning, and I'm sure there will be more that come. These are things that we expect. The virus that we saw for influenza 60 years ago, when we look at the genealogy of the virus from then all the way until now, it's astronomical how much variation there has been. There are some core elements, which still means that it's still influenza. Same thing for COVID-19. It's still going to be a coronavirus. It's just a matter of what direction it's going to take. So Delta variant in particular is what's a hot topic. And there are a lot of questions related to that, because what we are experiencing now is what science has generated a series of vaccines to basically prevent people to get the virus, but essentially reduce its transmission or reduce its severity. But the question is, if the virus is constantly changing, then how does a vaccine work? Well, the Delta variant is a strain. In other words, if you were to follow it in the genealogy, and where we find that strain is it happens to be the predominant variant here in the US. Originally from India back in October of 2020 is when it was first found, and is quickly spread throughout. And from that Delta, there are now variants breaking off called subvariants, which we call Delta plus. Regardless, the big take-home issues are that this virus is easier to transmit, or in other words, it is more contagious, and it does show signs of being more severe. But with the vaccines that have been developed, we do see breakthrough, and we do expect every vaccine to have some breakthrough. It's a question of the vaccines that we have now, do they need to be tweaked? This is very much for what we have for influenza. We do not have the same vaccine 10 years ago for influenza that we have now, because we are constantly having to change or evolve the vaccines that we develop to get ahead of these types of viruses. The key point for me and for all you would be with regards to what are you doing to not get the virus in the first place? I think for those who are vaccinated, that's fantastic. I myself am vaccinated. Moderna I took specifically with regards to the Delta variant. And but the key thing is, throughout this time, I still have never gotten COVID-19. I've been tested for antibodies just in case, absolutely none there. But then I also, am using the same standard procedures for reducing any kind of transmission or acquiring the virus. That means I do use, when I'm especially with patients, using gloves. I am using a full K95 mask, and I'm constantly doing hand washing. I'm being very observant of the areas where I touch. Even if I wear gloves, I can still touch the eyes, mouth. I avoid that all the time. And it's, trying to, as best as possible, we are social creatures, trying to limit large groups where I simply just don't know where there may be, somebody who's positive. So I think in large part, it's being forever vigilant. I think we're going to have to do that certainly now as more and more people. I mean, I look out my window, there's more traffic. I go outside, there's more people walking the streets and the stores. It means I have to be actually more observant of handlebars that I touch, or when I'm out, being vigilant. And that is very true for this coming winter. I think the single most determining factor for the vaccines that have been deployed is, what does this winter look like, and where will we be, say, in the end of spring of 2022? We have a lot of work that's being done on the development of vaccines continually. The vaccines now are coming with boosters, which everybody is aware, and I do encourage anyone who fits the time period to receive the booster, whether it's the Pfizer or Moderna. There is still a debate about Johnson & Johnson in terms of a booster, but then there is also emergence of other vaccines, in particular Novavax, which unfortunately is still having a lot of problems getting through. And unfortunately, I do think what's at play is you have to understand that there's a lot of business in vaccines now, particularly for COVID-19, and there probably is a little bit of politics behind it all. So I would hope the Novavax would be available in November, but don't hold my breath because I can't trust that that will actually happen based on factors that are behind the curtains. But if that vaccine is available, I would encourage those who are unvaccinated to certainly get that. And those who have received the other vaccines, you're covered if you get a booster really for this winter. But still, supporting your immune system. You need to make sure you are staying healthy, you're exercising, you're getting good nutrition, your sleep. I would certainly think with as much socialization now compared to last year, I would hope that some of the stressors of being isolated and cabin fever are a little bit better, but we are coming into winter time. I think people need to be prepared that, we will still be in that kind of a different state. So anything that questions come in, I'm certainly happy to answer those. I do have a few graphics to share as well, but I don't want to take you all down a rabbit hole. I think there are some certainly relevant things is who is going to be the most vulnerable to these variants. Well, the same thing applies for those for COVID-19 in general. There isn't going to be much of a difference for those who have severe compromised immune systems, those who are frail, those who suffer from conditions that would make them more susceptible or make it more difficult for them to fight a viral infection. I would say that we are approaching, and we do have cases locally now of influenza. So I would strongly encourage that just as much as we have done to vaccinate for COVID-19, that we are not failing to vaccinate for influenza. The standard trivalent, but also for the high dose and those for seniors is extremely important. So
Dr. Brown, we do have quite a few questions around the booster.
Yes.
So specifically about the Moderna booster, that this person's last vaccine was in February. So I guess what are some maybe details about the booster? How long does it last? Who should get it? When should she get it?
Yeah. So the important thing about the vaccines produced thus far is that you have two components. One is the humoral, which is the antibodies, and then the cellular. The cellular is memory. That means that your body actually for the rest of your life will remember COVID-19. But what's more important about these boosters is the boosters are providing a bump in the antibodies that are circulating in your bloodstream, so that when a virus enters in, it immediately sucks it up like a sponge. But after time, after you've given 6 to 8 months after a vaccine, your antibodies go down, and that's why you booster again to spike up your antibodies. And then again, so that should cover you for 6 to 8 months, which is the duration of this coming winter. It's very much what we do for influenza. Influenza usually has 3 variants every winter, but we only give 1 vaccine. So you have to question why. Well, it's hard to get people to take just 1 vaccine. Ideally, if we were to take 2 influenza vaccines, we'd get much better response in reducing or suppressing influenza, but that's a public health issue. COVID-19 has a lot more attention to it. So these boosters that are going into effect now, really, I think should also be applied for influenza if we want to suppress that. Influenza is in the area. So I do need to stress that. So even if you have symptoms and you test negative for COVID-19, doesn't mean that you still couldn't get influenza. You would think that because we're doing all these precautions, and this is why I'm concerned with influenza showing up, that those people who are vaccinated, maybe they have suppressed COVID-19, but it's not suppressing influenza, and they are not taking the precautions that they were before. If you were to look back in 2020, from March until the following, maybe about February of 2021, the peak season for influenza was obliterated compared to other years, simply because of the practices that people were employing and reducing the transmission. It's very much what we have now with COVID-19. We need to still be very vigilant. We need to wear masks, we need to wear the gloves and when appropriate, and hand sanitizer and all the other things. So the booster for Moderna specifically, what is the current recommendation? I'm sure this may change very quickly, is the third dose after 6 to 8 months, which would be now for you, I believe. Then it would be to give half dose of the full, what was the full dose of the Moderna. So if you go to your pharmacist, and there are pharmacies now that are giving the boosters for Pfizer and Moderna, that is the standard dose for the booster. You would just have to make sure you bring your card. They will have to note it on the card for the booster as well. Please don't come without your card because that will complicate their record keeping. And we'll find more and more that there probably will be avenues for people to upload their vaccination card so that it is put into a repository to confirm your vaccination status, which is what I had to do just earlier today.
And so the other question on the booster is, what is the right age group for the booster vaccine?
So the booster for, we want to be able to get the immune system turned on for the winter. In terms of the right age group, it would be a regular adult. But more importantly, I think the booster is specifically important for those who are more frail or who would be at higher risk. Those with certain lung diseases, certainly age can play a factor, or a variety, a whole host of different things. But there isn't really necessarily a right age as much as the right time and what are the right conditions based on the patient's health.
Thank you. We do have some more questions. Did you have something you wanted to show folks?
Yeah, it was just a kind of a tree to kind of show you that, we're really still in the very infancy of this COVID-19, and, as it evolves, and, you may hear the next one will be called Mu variant, and there'll be Lambda, and it'll keep going. We don't have those classifications for influenza, although H1N1, if people remember that was what it was then. We don't have, it's akin to the H1N1 is a variant, right? Scientists use the H1N1 as a scientific designation, whereas Delta is just maybe a little bit easier to digest. It probably will, there'll be like a B.1.1.1.1N. So Delta is what does it, kind of like a hurricane. Now the last one we just had, it was Ida. Well, this is Delta. And so the other questions you had?
Sure. So a couple of questions about, I was told if you had a strong reaction to either of the COVID vaccines, that you should not get the booster as you're most likely to have a stronger immune system. Is there any validity to that?
Yeah, so that is controversial. So again, getting the booster is to boost antibody. Your body's not going to produce antibodies for forever. Because it requires energy. So to conserve energy, it will rely on humoral or B cell memory. And then if you get infected again, then your body will make the antibody. But having circulating antibody, which is the point for the booster, it wouldn't make any sense not to give a booster for somebody, even if they seem to have a strong reaction to it. Now, the reaction may be physiological. You may feel the aches and the fatigue and those things. My bigger question is, what was your antibody response? And if you've had the vaccine, what does your antibody levels look like? Well, that is also part of the problem. There's not a standard test for Pfizer and Moderna antibody levels, the specific antibodies that we're looking for. that I can write an order and go to LabCorp and Quest, and then I'd get the results. And that is a serious deficiency. If somebody tested positive for COVID-19, the virus itself, there is an antibody test to determine levels. In fact, I have patients who had COVID-19 and have circulating antibody and are holding off on their vaccination simply because they are essentially they've been auto-inoculated with COVID-19, the natural virus. Another problem with this is we don't know if a patient who has had the vaccine gets COVID-19, there is no reflex lab that will then sequence that virus and determine which variant it is. We're in the blind as a clinician. We'd have to go through a special public health lab like here in DC and request them to sequence the virus and then determine if it is a variant and which variant. It would be a variant, it's just a matter of which one it would be. So that tool is missing, and we can't really determine if somebody's had the vaccine and is this variant sensitive to the vaccine. We just have to basically give the tincture of time to follow patients, stay on top of them, give them the treatments that they need to get through the virus and recover. But yeah, I think in this case, depending on when they receive the vaccine, 6 to 8 months, a booster would be recommended.
Okay, thank you. A couple of more questions, and then Margot, I just want to mention, I see your question. It's very specific, so I'm going to get to it last. So a couple more general questions. It is good. A couple other general questions though. Do you think that the future is an annual COVID shot for the general population?
I do think we'll continue to need to look at the tree that forms for COVID-19. It could well be that COVID-19 just gradually goes away and it may resurface again. It's kind of like yellow fever. As it kind of waxes and wanes, influenza is different by its, but coronaviruses themselves, I think there's a good chance that we'll have boosters before the peak seasons. Now, that's the only other interesting question. Influenza has peak seasons, usually 3, and they tend to fall in the fall, winter, and early spring. We don't know what those peak seasons will be for COVID-19. But the CDC and others might arrive at a touch point where vaccination with a booster would make sense. And I would support that.
Go back up to the beginning because you kind of said something. Another question is, so you kind of started mentioning that COVID might just go away, but do you think that if we had a certain percentage of the population were vaccinated, is being unvaccinated allowing it to spread?
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's very clear.
Yeah.
Those who are unvaccinated have greater transmission. They suffer greater illness. And that means if it tends to be those who are unvaccinated also have associations with those who are also unvaccinated, and it provides a supercell, so a super spreading event. So that it's been shown, and vaccinations clearly reduce that. Does it eliminate it completely? No, because people still need to take the precautions. If you make the combination between strong PPE practices and vaccinations, you've got a 1-2 punch against COVID-19. If you rely only on one and not the other, then it's not, we're going to keep, and if you remove the vaccinations and people not taking any precautions, the game's over. It's just going to keep, it's going to keep going. And then it'll be like a forest fire. It'll just have to burn out at some point.
Oh, that's a good analogy. Ellen asked, can anyone get a booster, and where does one schedule the booster?
Yeah, that would have to be at the pharmacy, and the pharmacist will have to review the record. That's why it's very important you bring the card, the CDC COVID-19 shot verification record.
Speaking of cards.
Yeah.
Speaking of cards, Mariah asked if a person lost their card and can't remember, what will happen?
The pharmacist where you had that performed, they should have a record of it, right?
Okay.
Yeah. They should.
Possibly.
They're required to.
Okay, so
I mean, if you went to different pharmacies, one should have that and the other one should have it, or if you went to the same one, then they'll have both.
or if you went to like the local health department or
Oh, yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
they will have a copy. So go
They're-
wherever you got the shot,
Yeah.
go to that.
Because
local.
the vaccination requires a manufacturer, but also the lot number. And that's very important. The lot of the vaccine is distributed to all the local governments and pharmacies. And there's very tight regulation on those lots because there has to be accurate accounting. Even disposing of a vial of unused vaccine comes with certain requirements and regulations. It's not taken lightly, or it should not be. And if it is not, then somebody's license should be reviewed.
Here's a really timely question. Can the booster vaccine be administered at the same time as the flu and shingles vaccine? And if not, what will be the duration between them?
Yeah, there's a recommendation that I would suggest, well, it also depends if you're getting the regular trivalent or quadrivalent versus the high dose influenza. I would suggest if you have enough time from your last vaccination with COVID-19 that you get the influenza vaccine now. And then you would wait 1 week after that, assuming because you can't get a vaccine if you're actively fighting another vaccine. I mean, what you're doing is you're asking your body to respond to what would be an infection in a controlled way. And you don't want to just do that back to back. You would want to give it, ideally a week in between. And then I assume this is for the Shingrix, or is this for there's a shingles vaccine, which is a series of 2 shots. Shingrix is an excellent vaccine. It does come with significant side effects after the second dose in most of my patients. So you would definitely want to maybe reserve that until after the COVID-19 booster. So influenza, high dose, regular, then your COVID-19 booster, and if you needed the shingles after that.
That makes sense. Sean, to answer your question, some people went to their local gym to get the COVID vaccine, but that was probably put on by something like a health department.
Yep.
Or local, pharmacy or something like that. So you would have to find out who put on that vaccination clinic, and that's if you needed to get your information, that's where you would contact. All right, let's go to, we still have time for a few more questions, but so keep typing those into the chat bot. I'm going to go to Margot's very specific question. So for someone who has Addison's disease and takes daily corticosteroids and mineral, I can't say that whole word, to replace what is not, okay, good, to replace what is not there or in very small amounts, would you consider that person immune suppressed or just at a greater risk of serious illness if they got COVID? And she has follow-up questions.
Yeah. So for Addison specifically, and not to I have to be careful about patient confidentiality, but immunosuppression with steroids can occur, and so this begs the question again of doing antibody testing after a vaccine to make sure the vaccine was effective. When you talk about immunosuppress, it may mean that you're not mounting as much of an attack against the vaccine, and therefore you're not as protected. Again, unfortunately, antibody testing for Pfizer and Moderna specifically doesn't really exist, and so it's kind of, unless Pfizer and Moderna magically release and I would implore that they would release the assays for the antibody testing for their vaccine. The time for the booster, 6 to 8 months after the second dose is what I would recommend for Moderna, and you'd be getting half. The current is that you'd be getting half of the dose of the first and second. So if you had a response to the second dose, that would be maybe encouraging. if you had absolutely no response, the question would be the steroid suppressed immune system. So you're not, again, because we don't have a lab testing, that's not something we would definitively know. And if they were immunocompromised, would it make sense to booster sooner? Again, the booster, the intention for the booster is to raise antibody levels. You already have the humoral or long-lasting memory from the cells that were responding to the vaccine. So it's not necessarily you want to do it at the time when the peak is potentially here. So if the winter is coming, September, October would be the time to do that.
Thank you for that. And I've got one more question here, just to confirm. So if you get a booster, wait 1 week for the flu shot, correct?
Yeah, or vice versa. I'd encourage getting the flu shot now because it's already here. You know, if you've already gotten the vaccine for COVID-19, right, 1 and 2, or Johnson and Johnson, then we already have influenza here, but you're not vaccinated. Get the vaccine for the influenza now, because you'll still have some protection from the COVID-19 that you already had. Unless you're unvaccinated, then yeah, get vaccinated now for COVID-19 and then get the booster. And then, you know, but influenza is we're a little shocked. It's early. We weren't expecting it to get here so quickly.
Yeah, good point. Thank you for that. Those are some really, really great questions. I'm gonna turn it back over to Sean to close us out and see if there's anything else. Sean, are you? Let's see. I can get him to unmute for me.
I'm here. I don't think I can do my video.
Oh, sorry. Let me see if I can help you with that. There we go.
Can you see me?
Yes.
All right, I'm back. Yeah, well, Dr. Brown,
Yep.
Great talk around this topic. I mean, it's funny, some of the, you know, the takeaways, I'm thinking back to the last time we talked. I mean, you know, the behaviors that we have to do to maintain our safety are the same. It's, you know, keep doing the hand washing and the PPE, but there's a strong argument for getting vaccinated. And I think, you know, at least in our world of private caregiving, there's some resistance to that. And, you know, this stuff, one question I did have, I'm not sure if it got answered. Do you know if there's, is there evidence of long-term negative effects of getting vaccinated? I mean, I guess it's a simple question, right?
That and the mRNA class of vaccines is exactly that question. We don't know if long-term, 10, 20 years, if there is some adverse effect because of the nature of the vaccines. The very first time we're using these types of vaccines in humans. We used them in other species, but in humans, don't know. It is always a consideration for the risk versus benefit. And we are trying to do the greater good for the greater number, but there will certainly be adverse reactions with any vaccine. We've had, you know, reports of those. Unfortunately, that's part of the statistics of anything. When you get to this huge of a scale, there will be allergic reactions. There will be other a whole litany of things that, you know, never would have expected, but they can occur.
Yeah. I mean, you know, we fully respect everybody's, you know, personal belief systems and their decisions of their own. But again, just kind of cutting through the noise and.
Well, you have to even think of it for myself. Was I the first one to jump as soon as the vaccine became available? No, I was not. And I'll be honest, because, you know, my background's in immunology and I'm a scientist and I have to have the data. I waited and thought about it and did, you know, constantly evaluate it. When the time was right, I was all in. And it wasn't a question. But yeah, I do understand that, you know, the reason I have not gotten COVID-19 is because of the standard practices I employ every day.
Right.
And I see a lot of people and I cannot get my patients sick by their, you know, so there was a point where I was testing myself every day, and that became a huge financial burden. I'm not able to do that anymore, but that's what I felt it was necessary to safeguard my patients. So with a vaccine and understanding that what I've been doing is work, I'm going to keep doing what I've been doing, and I'll have to test as much. But I do want to put one little plug, since I got you all here.
Please.
So we are in the course of all of this, there's been obviously some time to kind of sit and ponder about life. And in that regard, we have launched our docuseries, which we will be, it's right now what we have is just a website to be able to provide an introduction. And I'm putting into chat right now. It is a docuseries, which is about kind of like an Anthony Bourdain's Parts Unknown, and is intended to provide a medium for people's voices to be heard. We will be providing some stories over time, and we will release them when it's appropriate on COVID-19. But just about, we're going out to West Virginia to interview doctors who do house calls out there. We just got in Seattle. We'll be going to Turkey in October, if it's possible. That may have to get canceled, and I'm okay with that. But I just wanted to share it with the group. We are working on things to really kind of tell stories. If anybody has a story, anybody wants to connect, certainly you can do that. I think I'm not involved in the website, but I think one of the team members who are involved would take it and run with it. So we are looking for people with stories that want to contribute. We've got some fascinating things now, and I don't want to give away,
Are you talking about stories related to
life,
anything or COVID-19?
everything.
Great. And is this the website? Is it earnestmedicine.org?
Yep, that's it.
That's awesome. I mean, anytime you can put information like that into story form, it resonates even more. So that's really exciting. Congratulations.
There's so much information out there, and sometimes it's mind-boggling, and we just really want to be able to connect and tell stories from the field. So that's the intention for this piece. And this is a nonprofit venture. It is not. It is entirely self-funded. It is low budget, so no criticism about camera angles or quality, but that's what we got.
Reality TV. That's excellent. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you next time when we talk about the next topic.
Yes, let's make a brief one.
Yes, please. All right. Thanks everybody. Bye now.